My name is Dr. Michael Brown, and this is 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple, significant, and extremely strategic choices that all of us can make in order to be the very best version of ourselves. Today in the studio is Sammy Adebiyi, and we talk about becoming the best version of ourselves by learning to do a very difficult and provocative thing. Listen in. Pastor Sammy Adebiyi in the studio once again. I'm so excited to have you here and to have the conversation with you. You and I hang out a lot outside of this studio, having conversations about really significant things, but it's a real honor to have you in the studio where people can listen into our conversations. And not everyone knows you. I know you very, very well. Known you for many years, but because so many don't, would you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Sammy, and I'm a pastor, like you said. I lead a team of people who are trying to tell really inspiring stories, hoping to change the world. And I'm a husband, a father. I write.
Yeah, your book actually, let's talk about your book for a second.
Yes.
The name of the book is?
It's a book about friendship. So easy. It's a book.
Well, and again, I think that ties into our conversation for today. Because obviously if we're going to have friendship, we need to know how to apply these 3 words.
Tackle difficult conversations.
Tackle difficult conversations. I tell you what, as I hear you say that, I'm thinking, is anyone going to listen to this podcast? Or they're just going to hit pause, stop, go to the next one? Because this is a hard conversation.
That's right.
Nobody wants to be able to tackle difficult conversations.
That's right.
Hard. We don't like hard.
Very hard.
So you chose these 3 words.
Yes.
So why?
Couple reasons. Number one, biggest one is I realized that it's the only way that I can get the thing that I want the most. And so, and I think I can speak for probably most of humanity. The thing that we want the most is intimacy, right? Like we want to be fully known and fully loved. And we want that kind of relationship with people. And it is impossible to have intimacy without vulnerability. And vulnerability often requires us to have difficult conversations with people.
Well, and the word you chose was tackle them.
Yes.
Because they're hard to kind of slide into. They just tend to be postponed, avoided, delayed. And so you're saying, let's go. Let's just do it.
Yes.
What does that look like?
It looks like a lot of pain, and it looks like a lot of remembering the big picture. And so one thing that it can look a little bit different, obviously, in personal relationships and, with your wife, with your kids, with your coworkers, with your direct report. It could take different forms.
Sure.
But I think one thing I've always tried to remind myself of is that not only is this often the path to intimacy, but in a work environment, for instance, it's actually the most loving thing that I can do. Is to create a safe space to be able to have a difficult conversation.
As opposed to blaming, complaining, and gossip. Because gossip goes around the hard conversation.
Yes.
I'm going to have an easy conversation about you to someone else about what I don't like.
It's funny how easy those are, actually, by the way. It's so much easier to talk about the conversation I don't want to talk about to other people.
That's so funny you say that because we talk a lot about gossip. I do a lot of training on how to build culture, team culture. You talked about being a team leader. And I never thought about it that way until you just said it. But gossip actually is pretty easy.
It is.
And it's actually kind of fun.
That's right. That's right.
But then to have honest conversations, crucial conversations, difficult conversations, we just begin to get really kind of queasy inside. I'm going to hit pause on my conversation with Sammy right now to acknowledge that for many of our listeners and viewers, this is probably hard to hear. And the reason it's hard to hear is because you're thinking of one person right now you need to have a conversation with. Can I suggest that you actually forward this episode to them and say, let's have a conversation in light of what's being talked about today. Now back to the episode.
And I think one of the things that I also realize in tackling difficult conversations is that a lot of times the reason it's so difficult is because I'm thinking about myself, right? Mm-hmm. And so difficult conversations are difficult in part because they force us, right, to put other people ahead of ourselves. And so the reason I don't want to talk to you about it is because I don't know how you're going to respond. You may not like it. You may be mad at me. You may be upset. You may think a certain way. So I don't want that. And so because I don't want my experience to be tainted in a way that's not desirable, then I avoid the conversation. And so I think that it's not only important in terms of the relationship, but I think sometimes actually the best things that we can do for ourselves, because those conversations allow us to become the better versions of ourselves, which means oftentimes that we're putting other people ahead of ourselves. And so if I can get to a place where I'm actually thinking of what's best for you rather than what feels better to me, that's often a first step to be able to engage those.
Well, and you've used a couple of key phrases. It's the loving thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's the selfless thing to do. You've really framed this conversation in a way that I didn't expect you to, because usually we talk about, we need to have hard conversations. We need to engage and tackle difficult conversations because we want better teams.
Yeah.
And we want to solve problems and we want to become better. But you're saying it's actually a loving thing to do.
It is.
It's a selfless thing to do. And obviously you talked about intimacy. We deeply desire that as humanity, but it's not just for us, it's for others. And so when we engage, and we've all been there, right? We've had the hard conversations with our wives, hard conversation with our kids, and we're trembling as we do it. And then afterwards it's like, this burden is lifted because we are more understood.
Yeah.
We've expressed our wishes and our wants, and we've been more understood, and we've been heard, and we've been seen. But it is so, so hard. And obviously you've talked about some reasons why it's hard. Because people are, let's just acknowledge the elephant in the room.
Yes.
I can't imagine a situation where I'm going to engage in difficult conversation with anyone at any point where there's not going to be some degree of defensiveness.
That's right.
And it's, I teach this all over the country.
Yeah.
And I talk about how to build culture and how to have hard conversations. And every time I come home and Teresa says to me, babe, we need to talk. Immediately my defenses are going.
Yes.
So we teach it, but and so part of it is acknowledging you're going to feel defensive.
Yeah.
They're going to feel defensive. You're going to feel defensive. It's going to be hard. It's going to be painful, but it tends to be really good in the end. Now, if I may, since we're talking about having these conversations, I don't think I've had the opportunity to actually share this in a podcast.
Yeah.
But I talk about the 5 T's. Like, it is hard.
Yep.
It's profitable. It's meaningful, and it's important. But how do we do it? I'll be curious your response to some of the T's that I talk about, and maybe you have stories or illustrations yourself. But I talk about when you're going to engage in a hard conversation, you need to think about technique, timing, tact, tone, and transparency.
Yeah.
All T's, because that way I can remember.
Can I hit the last 2? Well, tone. It's just always such an interesting conversation. I realize in my relationship with my wife is that I've had to learn the hard way that it almost doesn't matter what I'm saying if I'm off in my tone. Which is a hard thing for me because I'm like, no, the point is the point. And she's like, the tone. I'm like, no, who cares about the tone? The point is the point. But you're right. If I cannot get the right tone right, then I'm almost self-sabotaging the conversation right off the start. And so,
And honestly, the way I think to keep the tone in a real positive way is to actually be in a posture where I care so deeply about the person across from me. If my objective in a hard conversation is to put someone in their place and to prove that I'm right and they're wrong, we might want to wait a day.
So can I ask you a question? So what do you do when you're frustrated? So I'm going to have a conversation with you. I'm genuinely frustrated. A lot of times I feel like, well, that's the point of my tone is that I'm frustrated. And so how do you divorce the feeling and the emotion that you're feeling? It's not just putting in your place, but maybe I am genuinely hurt and maybe I am genuinely frustrated. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the tone, if you're frustrated and angry or sad, that's where tone and transparency go hand in glove.
Yeah.
Meaning this, I want to be able to say, I'm really hurting right now, or I'm really frustrated, or that tone is okay. It's the tone of you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And I can't believe you did this. And you're so annoying.
But it's ironic, though, that the first thing you said is so much harder than the second thing. It's easier for me to just be like, this is stupid, you're dumb, than for me to say, I'm hurt.
I'm hurt. And that's why I love transparency. So let me talk through them real quick. So technique is, am I going to send an email?
Yeah.
Am I going to have the hard conversation in a text message? Am I going to have a face-to-face? To think about technique matters. What is the method of the hard conversation? Secondly is timing. I mean, in front of the whole group. When you're really, really fired up. When you just get home from work. When you're walking around in Disneyland with all your kids saying, let's go see Mickey and Minnie Mouse.
There's been so many emails. I'm like, I'll wait till tomorrow to send this email.
You can write the draft a day early and then maybe review it before you send it. But I think, timing, there's a good time and a bad time. But then I think as well, tact. What are the words you're choosing?
Yeah.
The tact is about words you're choosing. Tone is about the attitude.
Yeah.
My favorite ingredient to tackling difficult conversations, my friend, is transparency. I actually have a good friend who says every time he's in a hard conversation, or I should say a hard situation, where there's tension, there's conflict that needs resolved, he asks himself first, how have I been complicit to the situation that is before me today?
Yeah.
And so every one of us, regardless of what conflict we're in or we got to have a hard conversation, chances are we've been complicit in some way. So I think whenever you approach someone to have a hard conversation, to say, hey, I need to have a conversation with you. But as I was reflecting upon this conversation we're about to have, I want to acknowledge first that I have contributed in this way, that I could have done this better, that I have. And immediately the temperature in the temperature in the room goes down, right?
Absolutely.
If I'm coming to you saying, I'm going to have a conversation that's really hard, but I'm going to own all my stuff first, immediately the person is still probably a little defensive.
Yeah.
My tone is going to be better.
Yeah.
Because tone is going to be shaped by that transparency. And I'm going to have the open door, and they're going to probably have better ears to hear what I'm about to say.
And if I could take what you just said,
please,
and put it in a work team environment. One of the things that always surprises me when I have transparent conversations with the team I lead is how much respect it actually earns. It's always kind of shocking because when you're vulnerable and you go before your team and go, I dropped the ball, that's on me, I allowed it, I'm mad, but I created that or I allowed that. It's amazing to always see them actually like be drawn to, they're inspired almost by the vulnerability as opposed to me coming and going, that's what you did wrong and that's what you did wrong. And so it's always kind of cool, I think, and surprising to just see how even transparency a lot of times inspires people to want to follow you. And you don't think that. You think that, man, if they see my weakness, they're going to bail. But a lot of times they actually want to follow a transparent leader.
Well, and I think with you, you're having a transparent, honest conversation with your team within a culture that you have built from the ground up, meaning the culture needs to be in place where those are safe conversations, where we can have those hard conversations and there's not retaliation, where there is openness, where there is teachability.
I mean, you've always said struggles are okay, secrets are not, right?
Well, yeah, struggles are normal, secrets are not. That's right.
Yeah.
But I think as well, when you talk about why people respect you, and I say this wherever I go to talk about teams or even families where people are willing to do what you just suggested, which is tackle difficult conversations, I tell everyone in every context, whether it's a sports team in a locker room, whether it's a fraternity on a campus, whether it's in a boardroom, if you have someone who in a kind, generous way and direct and thoughtful and honest initiates a hard conversation with you, you better believe they care about you.
Yeah.
Because they're not enjoying this moment.
Yeah.
and they could have avoided it.
Yeah.
They could have gossiped about you. Yeah. They could have pretended and said, well, I'm just going to wait until and it will eventually go away. Yeah. But the fact that they're engaging that conversation, you should receive that as a hug.
Yeah.
Because if it's done correctly, but here's the deal too, even if it's not done perfectly, give people the benefit of the doubt. The fact that they initiated with you
that's right.
and did a hard thing because they care.
Yeah, that's right.
So any other practices or examples or just tips that you're thinking about as you initiated this conversation with me about hard conversations as we begin to kind of turn the corner and wrap this up?
I think it's helpful to think of hard conversations as a long game too, right? So oftentimes we're thinking of the immediate feeling and it's like sometimes when you work out and you're like, that wasn't fun, but you keep doing it and it's going to yield fruit and results over time. And so I've learned a lot through personal experience that sometimes I have a hard conversation and for days I may not feel good for a week, but almost always I'll look back a year later and I don't regret having that conversation. And a lot of times even the person on the other side, often comes back to be like, man, that was a really helpful conversation. And so, but I think in a friendship context, I've always just felt like I've seen so many friendships that are one difficult conversation away from being incredible, but nobody will talk about it, And so you hurt me and I can't say it to you and you're not going to say it to me. And so we kind of just remain in this space. And it's like, man, if we would just have that conversation, we're actually going to be closer than we were before we had the conflict.
Oh, now you're Pastor Sammy, you're preaching.
I know.
So here, because again, conflict is not a threat to deeper intimacy. It's the pathway to it.
Say it again.
Conflict is not a threat to intimacy, but it is a pathway to it. And what you just described, if I can close our conversation, having a hard conversation not only is loving, not only is selfless, but it's also an investment.
That's right.
It's a serious, big dollar investment in the future of your friendship, your marriage, your family, and or your team. Sammy, always a pleasure being with you in the 3 Words Podcast studio. I look forward to the next conversation.
So good to be here. Have me back again, please.
Wow, what a great conversation with Sammy. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you want to go deeper with 3 Words Podcast and the DMB Coaching family, would you go to dmbcoaching.com/subscribe? There on our website, there's so many resources available to you. You can also enroll in our digital newsletter that you can receive in your inbox every single month. So again, thanks for being with us today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.